we had a vote on whether to keep the first past the post system. I think it's probably back in the early 2010s, was it? I don't know. It's when the Liberals were in coalition, and people voted against it. Um, they were satisfied with the first past the post. Do you think the people like to change their mind now?
I
What
think
do you
there's,
think?
I think that's a very good question. I think there's a couple of things going on here. Most people didn't vote. Again, it was a
Mm,
referendum again, this was a deal done by David Cameron with the Liberal Democrats because that was the only way they'd be in power. And the Labour Party, under Jeremy Corbyn, didn't support it. So
mm,
Labour Party voters tended not to vote. Most people didn't bother to vote. I can't remember what the turnout was. Um, and it was never explained. It was all made very, everybody was talking about everything from the D'Hondt system in Northern Ireland to making it really, really complicated, rather than essentially, do you want to have a system where there are at least five parties in contention in most constituencies? And if you vote for four of them, you're a wasted vote, and people will get in on a third of the votes, which has happened. It wasn't really explained, and it's boring. I think constitutional matters to most British people have got much. Most of us have got much more on our minds than constitutional matters, but it happens to be really, really important. And I think there will come a time, and it may be, because this is what usually happens, it may be out of enlightened self-interest. It may be that the Labour Party realise that if 40% of us aren't going to vote, maybe a third of us are going to vote for reform at the next election. And if 30% of people vote for reform, they'd have a landslide, if given
mm.
the nature of the system. So I would like to think they would do it because it's the right thing to do, but I suspect they might do it from enlightened self-interest. And it may be that they will say, if you vote for us at this election, we'll give you PR at the next one. And I think if they said that, it would actually happen. But it works everywhere else. There's no magic bullet, as I say. Friedrich Merz in Germany has got all kinds of problems, but he'd have more problems if it was a first past the post system and the AFD are polling at over 30% because they'd be in power. And we should remember that on that kind of system, again, this is. I don't want to make a facile comment about 1933, but Hitler didn't win a majority of the votes of the British people. He got in because he was the biggest party and it was a backstairs deal. So um, no voting system is perfect, but I think the time is ripe now and people are thinking about it. And it is in the interests, it may be in the interests of the Conservative Party if they want to save any seats to actually support this. That'd be a very odd thing to happen, but it could happen.
Two questions really from the point of view of kind of broadcasting and media coverage. One is, why do you think it still seems to be taboo to actually tell the truth about the damage that Brexit is doing? And then I think the second one is just, why is it that the media gives so much oxygen to reform? Because the coverage that they get just is completely out of line with their actual the voting intentions of the public.
Yeah. I'll have a go at both. I think the first question is slightly easier. I think the truth is out there, as they used to say. And I think many people have grasped it now because they've seen how it affects their own lives. And I genuinely do think that so many of us go on holiday to, Spain and get stuck in queues, and we wonder why other people are sailing through, beside us. There's a bit of that. There's a bit of the bureaucracy. We see that nothing seems to be better. We seem to have gone backwards. The figures are there. I think at first there was a reluctance to say, it's very difficult to say the British people have got it wrong. And I think that was why Labour came on board and had to essentially push through with it. I think the reform question is in some ways more difficult to answer. I think my personal view is that Nigel Farage is a great campaigner. He's a great creator of problems. He hasn't solved any problems for anybody. And I went through, I did an article, I do an articles for quite a lot of newspapers and I do a lot of podcasts. This is Not a Drill and is one of the main ones. And This is Not a Drill tends to focus on flashpoint issues and so on. And I think Nigel Farage is excellent at campaigning, but he's gone through many colleagues who have left various parties and many different parties in many different incarnations. And so that it is interesting that there hasn't been more made of that and of some of the things that he's done in the past. And I can't quite explain it. He was given, it's very difficult not to give him quite a bit of airtime now, for instance, on the BBC, given the success that he had in the local elections. Before that, it would be easier. But certainly, he's quite often given a bit of an easy ride, it seems to me. I mean, people don't bring up, I haven't heard it recently, it's not a secret, but they don't bring up the fact that he did lots of TV appearances on the Russian propaganda channel, Russia Today, or whatever it's called, which is a paying job. He did, and I find this really embarrassing. He obviously didn't know what he was saying, but he used to take, I think it was about 80 quid for birthday greetings to people. And in one of them, he said, up the Ra. That means up the IRA to anybody who knows anything about Ireland. So there's all kinds of strange embarrassments which never get mentioned. And that sort of surprises me. I think people, rather like Boris Johnson's appeal, which was often on Have I Got News for You, where he was the butt of jokes, but he sort of took them and he bluffed his way. I think Nigel Farage gets away with quite a lot. And whether there's going to be any more scrutiny, I think there'll be a lot of scrutiny, frankly, of the local councils that they run, that Reform run. And that may change things a bit. And we'll see how the party goes. Because very often it seems to be a party for people who are just dissatisfied. And I get that. I get that people are dissatisfied with things the way they are. But I think we can do better than the Reform Party.
I've been sent a question by somebody who can't ask it in person, whether you would favour a move by Britain to compulsory voting.
I don't like the idea of making anything compulsory. I just like the idea of making it more attractive. You could say, I would like to somehow say that if you don't vote, you can't complain, but that's very difficult to police. I'm not quite sure what we'd do about that. But I don't like the idea of saying to people, you should vote. I think we need to, first of all, it may come to that. I think it happens in Australia, but I don't quite know how their system works. I think it would be better if we made voting more attractive. So we could say, yeah, if you're in a constituency which mostly votes Labour, it might be worthwhile also voting for the Greens, as you would like to do, or whatever it is. So we're not there yet. But my instinct is not to force people to exercise their rights, but to make their rights so attractive they want to exercise them.
A lot of these people that sort of came after Cameron wreaked or threw the referendum out upon us were originally of a pro-European bent. Frost was one. He was the chairman of the Scottish whiskey industry, I think, and was pro
that was Frost.
EU. Theresa May, although she'd been Home Secretary before and had some odd approaches, she, I believe, was pro-EU. Liz Truss.
Liz Truss,
pro-EU. There are a few others I couldn't mention, but what made these people who were so pro the way the UK was suddenly turn on a halfpenny and come back and be anti-EU? You got any insight on that?
I've got a short answer and a slightly longer answer. The short answer is ambition. That's it. Theresa May saw it was a way to become leader of the Conservative Party. Liz Truss saw it as a way to become perhaps, leader of the Conservative Party. You wear one thing and you suddenly turn around and do the other thing and then negotiate a ridiculous trade deal with Australia. It's just bizarre. I think it really is that, unfortunately. And I think this is another part of the systemic failure. I hate to mention the C word, constitution, but I'm going to have to at some point. I think most of us, and I've talked to audiences from Belfast to Kent to all over England and Scotland. Most of us are taught at school that the Constitution of the United Kingdom is well, in the words of was it Lord Macaulay, pure gold, while others are just cheap old money. It's not like that anymore. Most of us haven't got a clue. We don't study the Constitution the way Americans do. And I'm not saying that the American Constitution is necessarily inviolate, but what it does mean in Britain is the executive, that is the Prime Minister, can make up the rules more or less as they go along. That's not entirely true, but that's pretty much it if you look at it. Executive privilege. Boris Johnson tried to do it with proroguing Parliament. He was stopped by the Supreme Court, thankfully. But they can do what they like in the sense that they can have a non-binding referendum which becomes binding. Which doesn't spell out anything. So I think that's the original sin of Brexit, that we have executive privilege, which means that if you become prime minister, you can do a lot. You can until you lose your own party and they want to get rid of you, or honorably, as Cameron did, resign. And that's a fundamental failure, it seems to me. And that's something that we've not put right. Not only do we not put it right, we're literally taught in school that the Constitution is absolutely wonderful and it's the envy of the world and so on. Except there are, well, I don't think there's no country in Europe with an unwritten constitution except the United Kingdom, I think. And very few. I think Israel doesn't have an unwritten constitution. Ours is, I should say, is uncodified rather than unwritten. But that's part of our problem.
So really, rather than do what the likes of Stewart and Letwin and Grieve did, where they either got a bit of a push or they decided, no, not for me, or maybe they weren't that ambitious and didn't have those feelings. They did it purely to retain power.
I think all those people are honourable people, and I hope they come back to the Conservative Party if it ever reinvents itself. I should say, I was at I was with Dominic Grieve when he was going to address a meeting of a pro-European meeting in Canterbury, and I bumped into him in the street. We were going to meet at the meeting, but we walked in beforehand, and he walked around. He said, "Oh, you've reminded me of something. I'm going to mention it in the meeting." We get into the meeting, and he said, he gets up to about 500 people at this meeting, and he said, I'm just walking with Gavin through Canterbury, and I was thinking I used to be a lawyer at Canterbury Assizes. And he said, it reminded me, and I understood what Boris Johnson reminded me of, the accused. So we have the witty but out side of the Conservative Party who may return to the fold. Who knows?
And just finally, one I didn't put in the chat, thank you. That those make perfect sense. But to what extent? And I know Johnson had an advisor who pushed and did a lot of the thinking, and then jumped ship and did all he could to get rid of him in the voice of Cummings. I know that today I read in various places that even Keir Starmer and some of the Labour Party, they have an Irish fellow, McSweeney, who's also in that role of being able to give these people a brief. Think that these people are too powerful, or are they sitting there just on the sidelines trying to spot the way public opinion wants them to go to keep them in power?
Well, I think there will always be advisors, and there will always be sort of Svengales and so on. But I mean, Dominic Cummings did for himself. He went for an eye test in
Yes, he
Northeast
didn't do
England, as we
well.
know. So they sometimes do for themselves. But I think it's good to have a wide range of advisors, and it's good to have a kind of coherence. And I think we may be seeing the opposite happening in Washington right now. So I'm not against it in principle. I think some individuals perhaps we could do without.
Basically, to paraphrase regarding ambitious people who turn on a sixpence to the polar opposite view, Douglas Adams once said, anyone who can get themselves made president, prime minister, premier should, under no circumstances, be permitted to do the job. Funny, true, though, but if you think about it, these people were brought in by their electorate to do a job and then swung completely the other way. How can such a thing? I know it can happen, but where's the safety in that? Where's the safety net?
Well, just to pick up your point and just say very briefly, I like politicians who want to do something. I don't like politicians who just want to be something. Now, I think Tony Blair wanted to do something. Margaret Thatcher wanted to do something. Other politicians, Macmillan and others, after World War, the Labour government after World War II really wanted to do something. I think that's fine, and we can criticize them and say we don't like their policies and whatever. But we have got a lot of people in politics on both sides of the Atlantic who want to be something, and they don't seem to really care what they do as long as they can be something. And I think that is, I don't know how you outlaw it. I'd quite like to, maybe there's a way, but I can't think what it is.